go ahead and get into it. You guys ready?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Did you get a chance to look at the notes that I sent out on Thursday?
Yes.
All right,
I'm
cool.
looking
Well,
at
actually,
that.
I guess, but before I get into that, do you guys have any thoughts on the revised draft of the first three sections?
My I
I
think I
came,
would
I basically stiff armed your biography comment, Kyle.
yeah, no, I understand. That was my only thing that I saw that it didn't change, and that's fine. Like I said before, it's not I just wanted to throw in my input because I was still a little bit lost on it. But yeah, I think everything else looks really good. I like how you still left the circles, or I think that goes a long way. But yeah, I mean, that was my only thing that I was like, ah, he probably just hated my idea.
No, I actually think it caused me to think. I think it was a really good point. It made me realize that I had misnamed the section because you're like, hey Zach, this is a bad biography. I'm looking at him like, you're right. This is not a good biography, but it's not supposed to be.
Okay.
But it's also good to know that there would be interest in understanding more detail. So okay, I'll write that. I'll just put it somewhere else so that
Yeah.
it's not distracting from the purpose of the section. So it's all valuable. Even though I'm not applying it within the section, I will apply it.
Okay.
And it did change the title.
Yeah, and if anything, I think it just highlights a general background of other than you just saying, hey, dad was a pastor. So
Yeah, better than nothing.
yep.
Um, I'm gonna see. Sorry, guys. I'm doing this on my iPad, which I'm not used to.
Are you're not in your home base, are you?
No, I'm in Austin for a wedding.
Okay.
My girlfriend and I have some friends. They're her friends originally, my friends now, that are getting married down here. But I really like to remove my self view, and because it's like I'm not talking to myself, but I don't know if I'll be able to get it off. That's okay. I don't know how to do it on here. There's usually a button. Hey, double tap. There we go. Now you're full screen. So, how about I quickly run through my notes for the next section just to kind of connect the dots because I wrote that in shorthand, and then you guys can let me know what you think about it.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So where we've come so far is we're talking about disorientation. What happens when you've built your life on something like a set of beliefs, and then the whole entire thing comes crashing down to the very bottom, and you have to start from scratch. Then what do you do? So my answer is I think that we have to ask this primary orienting question, which is reality good? And if it is, what's it good for? I think that is actually the bottommost question that you can possibly ask. I'm open to being challenged on that, but it's the best answer I've found so far. So then once you start asking that question, it becomes apparent. I mean, what is kind of obvious, reality is bigger than us. We can't comprehend the whole of reality. And yet, in order for me to act, I have to be oriented because acting is moving towards something. In order for me to be oriented, I have to ask the primary question. And so I'm kind of left with this dilemma. I need to have an axiom to work on, but I don't have the comprehension to judge reality. It would be as ridiculous as a boy judging his mom running away from home. It's like, what do you know? Um, so then our three answers are number one, we can avoid the question. Number two, we can answer the question in the negative. And then number three, we can answer the question in the positive. And each answer is a choice because we cannot know the whole thing. We have to choose. I'm basically going to bet my life on one or the other, and I won't find out until my life is over if I bet right. So what I'm trying to understand now is have I defined these three options correctly? Am I characterizing them correctly? Because the way that I'm characterizing the indecision, what I'm calling indecision, avoiding the question, is that it's cowardly. It's like the monster parent story where I didn't want to ask my parents if they were monsters because maybe they would say yes. But if I don't ask them, I can't ever hear them say no. so that I can have peace. So indecision would be avoiding that. I'm just going to play along. Maybe this whole thing is a lie, or maybe it's true, but I would rather pretend that it's a lie than discover that it's a disaster. So I say that indecision is cowardly, and I say it produces lukewarmth, like you're not hot, you're not cold, because the depth of your foundation of, if you imagine that orienting tower, the depth of your foundation determines the depth of meaning in your life. And here's why. Meaning is implication for action. As in, if I'm driving down the road, it's not meaningful for me to know that there's like there's 3 bushes in the dentist's garden outside of his office as I'm like driving to the grocery store. It's like I don't need to know that. It's not relevant. It's not meaningful. Why? Because I don't need to respond to that. Whether there's 3 or 4 bushes in the dentist's garden does not affect my action. So it has no meaning to me. So meaning is implication for action. So when we orient ourselves, we start by asking the question, what is? This is the Peterson model. We start with what is, and then what should be, and then how do we get there? So what is it's not just like what is everything. Well, it's like, okay, there's a lamp on my desk, and there's a screw in the wall, and there's a painting on the wall. That's not what is. What is defined relative to what should be. We ask what is so that we can then ask what should be. In other words, our answer to what is informs what we aim at. It informs our action. So in other words, when we ask what is, we're seeking meaning. We're seeking truth that provides implication for action. That's the relationship of what is to what should be. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Okay. So then the more deeply you can ask what is, the more meaning your life will have. Because what is implication for action, which is meaning. So if you ask a deep what is, then you have deep meaning because those things are the same. And I walked through in the primary orienting question, the most fundamental what is what is the whole entire thing. Like, it's a deeper question to ask what is a tree than it is to ask what is a leaf, because you can't understand the leaf except as a part of the tree. The leaf emerges to serve a tree. So like we know, the leaf comes out, it absorbs light, and then uses photosynthesis to serve the tree. So the leaf is defined relative to the tree. Well, what's the tree? If the tree is meaningless, then the leaf is meaningless because the leaf is a part of the tree. So if you want to have a meaningful life, you have to go all the way down and wide and ask, what is the whole? But it's not just the facts about the whole, it's what is the implication for action of the whole? What is the meaning of the whole? Because only that can direct you to action. Only that can provide you with direction or a destination. And if I avoid asking that fundamental question, my life will lack meaning, because meaning comes from the answer to that question. It is the question of meaning. And so then, like me with my parents, I'm like, I don't know if they're monsters. I don't know if they're not. Maybe I'm playing along, or maybe they really love me. Maybe if I ask them, they'll eat me, or maybe if I ask them, they'll reassure me. I don't know. We can do that with life by never asking that fundamental question. Like, what is this thing really? What is the implication for action of being born here in this reality? So then why do we do things? We do things for shallow reasons. We have our what is it doesn't make it all the way down to the whole. So for example, when I was in college, I struggled to pick a major. I couldn't decide what to study because I had, like, why would I do anything? Because I didn't have any understanding of what I was born into. So why would I do anything? I didn't know why I would do anything. Now all of a sudden I'm faced with a decision. What do I do with my life? What should I study in school? I had to pick a direction, but I had no reason to go anywhere. But I didn't think of it that way at the time, but that's what was happening. So I said, I'm going to study finance, because if I study finance, I'll make money. And then if I make money, at least whenever I figure out what I want to do, I'll be able to afford going back to school, and then I can do that. Okay, so that gave me something to do. That's a what is. I don't know what to do, but I can make money in finance, and I can use that money to go back to school whenever I figure out what to do. It's a provisional map. It's a provisional destination, but it's not ultimate. So then I did finance. I did really well. I went into investment banking, and I was just like, I'm going to make as much money as possible. My objective was really clear, and so I could fully deploy myself toward that clear objective. Except the whole thing broke down as soon as I succeeded. I performed. I learned. I'm actually really good at this. I've designed some machine learning algorithms. My boss thinks I'm a wizard. If I keep doing this, then I'm going to keep getting promoted, and 10 years from now, I'll be making $1 million a year. So my wealth is guaranteed. I've basically, my whole orienting structure was complete. I did it, which then forced me to recognize that there was nothing outside of it. So I became incapable of working. I completely lost my energy because I realized I started doing this so that I would have money to go back to school when I figured out what I wanted to do. But now I have the money and I still don't know what to do. So the problem's not solved. This is meaningless because I didn't go deep enough. And so then I was like, well, okay, maybe entrepreneurship. That sounds fun. Like then I can make money doing that, but I'll own the thing. I'll have more freedom. So then I went and built my company, but suffered from the same problem because, okay, I built my company. Now I have money and I have freedom. I still don't know what I should do with my life. So I think that this indecision, the refusal to dig in and answer the fundamental question that reality poses to us, it looks like this kind of like shallowness. It looks like I'll have a goal and I'll move toward it, maybe even impulsively, like very quickly. I'll find a target, and because I'm not interested in checking the integrity of this tower of orientation. I kind of just want to keep busy. This is sort of the Teddy Roosevelt black hair girl. He sits behind a rider whose pace is fast enough. It's like I just need to find something to aim at and move toward it, because as long as I'm moving towards something, I don't have to shine a light on what lurks under the surface. It takes my attention away from that. But then the problem with that is those towers collapse eventually because they have no foundation, and towers built on no foundation collapse. They don't have integrity. So I would go after something for a time, and then everything would fall apart. And then I'd pick something else, and I'd go after that for a time, and it would fall apart, and then something else. So it creates this pattern of sort of impulsive, maybe even highly energetic action and achievement, followed by a collapse, and then like trying to do the same thing, but then eventually you sort of despair of doing that because I have to ask this question. Like life is forcing me to ask, what is this thing? Like what am I supposed to do here? Is there anything for me to do here that's actually worthwhile? Is there anything for me to do here that has sustaining meaning, that's not going to fall apart after I do investment banking for 2 years, or after I run my company for 2 years, or whatever? We have to ask. So I think I characterized that as cowardly, which I think is harsh, because it's like, I mean, I participated in it, but at the same, and I think I don't want to trivialize the serious I don't want to trivialize the serious risk that you have to take in order to ask that question. It's a daunting thing to do for everybody. Like there's no way to ask that question that's not daunting. But it is cowardly because you have to have the courage to face reality as a potential monster, meaning like in order for me to ask, does life have a meaning? I have to open to the possibility of the answer being no. And your life is actually meaningless, and maybe you would be better off dead. And Shakespeare wrote about it, and that's why what he wrote was famous. It's cliche now, but it's famous because he has a point. So I've been thinking a lot about the indecision part. Do you guys have any thoughts on that before I kind of go on to the other two options?
Well, one quick thought that I have is, especially like looking back to like a young man's perspective, how much of that is just sheerly negligence, right? Not knowing the right question to ask. Like to me, in order for it to be categorized as cowardism, you would
Mm,
almost have to be aware of the question that you're refusing to ask,
mm,
So like there's a sense of innocence to
yeah,
that, right? Where it's like you don't know what's going on, you don't know what questions to ask, you're just doing, you're just acting. And then maybe you could say, okay, the positive or the negative action is still valid because hopefully you're at least aware of that. So you could say, okay, is the choice that I'm making positive or negative? And then maybe once you make a choice that's defined, then it becomes apparent, okay, maybe I didn't ask the right question. Then you look back at your finance career and say, okay, maybe the framework that I was operating under was totally off because I asked the wrong question. It reminds me of someone was talking about a while ago. I can't remember where I heard it. They were saying like most people are still living their like childhood dream, like they still have like the same goals from when they were a child when they're in their like 40s and 50s. So you ask like a 40 or 50-year-old, like, hey, what are you trying to do? And they're like, oh, well, I just want to retire, have a summer house or a winter house in Florida and then live on the beach. And it's like, that's an immature thought. Like
mm,
that is not realistic. That is like, you have refused to ask yourself the right question. Now having the consciousness to ask the right question. Now like that person, I would say, okay, they are being a coward. They are
got
intentionally
it.
not asking the right question. But to a 24-year-old man, I mean, I would argue that it's not a conscious decision. They don't know what the right question is to ask.
And I
That's a
think
great point. I think you're spot on.
to tap onto what you said is innocence or possibly ignorance of just not understanding and knowing what question to ask. And, basically what you had outlined, Zach, is that it seemed like every idea that you were chasing, you were building the roof before you built the foundation of the house,
Yeah,
where
nice.
you had in your mind, you had a super solid, let's say a very intricate roof, but then you had some pixie sticks for the foundation. And at some point, those pixie sticks were going to get wet and they were going to crumple to the ground.
Yeah.
So it just sounds like that's kind of what it was. And I think I've done that. Like
Mm,
my wife and I had a conversation the other day of, when I was 18, I thought I was going to be married and have 3 kids at the age of 23. And that was maybe the dumbest thing that I have ever thought
mm,
of, like, that's how my life was going to be spelled out. I always knew that I was going to be in sales and I wanted to make a bunch of money. But I just thought that would come. I had no real plan or guidance on how to get there. So,
mm.
But
That's
it's almost like you have to build a house before you pour the foundation the first time. Because
huh.
how can you build a foundation if you don't have the knowledge and the whereabouts to know what the foundation should be? It's like it's almost like if all you did was try to build up the foundation before you built the house, like you would never build the house because you'd never have the insight and the experience to know what the foundation should be. So as like specifically in the examples that we're giving, it's like you almost have to just like try to put the roof on the house first and be like, whoa, like this thing's gonna fall over. And then it does fall over and you're like, okay, that house failed. Next house, like, let me pour a strong foundation. But then even then, maybe you build it and it's better than the first house, but then that house falls. And then you get put in those liminal phases that we talk about
Mm,
sometimes. And it's like you almost have to like keep building these houses to completion, let them fail, and then you take responsibility for the next decision.
I think that also could, I mean, and to put it in completely layman terms, like, you have to fail in order for you to truly, I mean, for the trajectory for you to be completely successful. Something has to fail. And that could be categorized differently, where I don't know, Zach, if you would consider your investment banking career to be a failure, but in a sense of the grand scheme of things, it wasn't the grander plan. It wasn't the end all be all. So I guess you could categorize it as a failure.
mm,
No different of, hey, we didn't build a foundation for this house. Now it's a pile of rubble. So
mhm. Yeah. But then if you can take the lesson learned out of it, it becomes a stepping stone.
correct.
which
And
is
maybe
worthwhile.
maybe a good question to ask is what happens if you don't have those failures? Like what happens if you don't shoot for something big, if you don't dedicate yourself 100% to an idea
Ooh.
to follow it through? What's the consequence of that? Because in my mind, that's cowardism. Like
Mm.
if you don't if you don't try something at 100% and you don't follow through with it to see what it turns into, to me that's the most cowardly thing that you can do. And then like part two of that would be, now that you've done that thing and it's failed, you have a choice. You can either respond to that and what's most likely a hard pivot, right? You've built a career someplace, you have creature comforts, you have stability, and now you have to sacrifice that to do the best, the next best thing. Or you're a coward and you say, well, I don't want to give up my my quality of life to do what's right. I'm going to do a little bit on the side. I'm going to slow down that like that
Mm.
momentum.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, because it's like you might not aim at even your childish fantasy because you're afraid of striving for it and failing. But for that reason, you never achieve it and realize your foundation was not solid. Like you never realized that it was a bad target to begin with. And so then you can't learn that it was a childish fantasy. You think it's actually the thing. And that's maybe what leads to the 40-year-old going after the same. It makes me think of when I was leaving investment banking, I decided that I wanted to leave and start my own company, but I didn't know what company to start. It's kind of a similar problem as I ran into college thinking back on it. But I started asking my friends and my coworkers, hey, Zarina, I started asking my friends and my coworkers why they were doing what they were doing in hopes of discovering that like some unmet need that I could fill. It's like, maybe if I understand why these people are motivated to do this, I can find a gap and build a business to, serve that market. So everybody I talked to, part of this is a function of like everybody I knew was basically in finance. Everybody I talked to, I'm like, why are you doing this? It came down to make money. Like my effort, my primary goal right now is I'm making money. I'm making all these sacrifices because I want to make money. And I got that answer so many times that I started asking a different question. I said, if I deposited $100 billion in your bank account today, then what would you do? Like, what would you do today? Would you go to work today? Would you go to work next week? And everybody then again gave me the same answer, and which I was surprised to hear, that like everybody around me sort of had the same fantasy. They said, if you give me $100 billion, then I would travel. Then I'd be set. Give me $100 billion, let me travel, and I'm good. But then I was like, that's like, why is everybody asking the same answer? And like, what's underneath that? So then I started asking a new question. I said, okay, imagine I give you $100 billion today. I put it in your bank account today. And then you can travel until you're satisfied. Like 10 years, you go everywhere you ever wanted to go. You've got $100 billion to do everything you ever wanted to do until you're done. Then what would you do? And every single person was stumped. Basically, I got to the bottom of their shallow orienting tower, which was, to be fair, no shallower than mine. But it's like, what happened? Like, if you actually achieved your fantasy, then what? And they're like, actually, I don't know. I'm kind of just doing this to keep myself busy. And the dream allows me to stay on the hamster wheel.
So is that not an act of cowardism? Is that not like them saying, like voluntarily saying, this is a distraction and I'm buying into this distraction, so I don't have to ask the real question, so I don't have to go out and seek the real truth, because what is true might not align with whatever dopamine hits they're getting from their current trajectory.
And it's so common. Like, you can keep yourself busy doing that for decades. Like, that's how, I mean, you can waste your life on that. And we have a word for when people snap out of it. Do you know what it is? The midlife crisis. Everybody, right? Everybody knows. It's like, what have I been doing with my life? It's like, yeah, you never thought about it.
They say that money fixes a lot of problems. Which yeah, would I love to pay my house off if you handed me that money? Of course I would. But on a funny side note, when's the last time you saw somebody crying in a Lamborghini? I'm just saying. You probably haven't.
I think it's who's the comedian? He says, I've never seen anybody crying on a jet ski.
Yeah.
He's like, if you think money doesn't buy everything, then something like you're just not rich enough. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Daniel Tosh.
Yeah, he's funny.
Yeah,
No,
but
back to the innocence and ignorance thing real quick. I've got a motto that in my life, how you do anything is how you do everything. So there's a book I read several years ago, and it was by a naval captain, and it basically just outlines to start each day, like having achieved something, and you start each day by making your bed. And I will not leave my house. I will not leave my bedroom until that bed is made. And I think that then if you feel unaccomplished of the day, you're like, well, you know what? Although small and trivial, I made my bed. So there is something accomplished in that day. And I think that can build a foundation and a framework for everything else throughout the day. Or, hey, you know what? If I know that I'm giving 100% in my job, I can give 100% in my relationship or whatever it may be.
Yeah, we're big bed makers also. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But do you do the folded corners? That's the real question. Zach, you need to elaborate on the corners.
I quit the military corners, but I started military corners in COVID, which, maybe is like the order to offset the chaos. Like, here you've got national or global pandemic, and then I've got like military corner beds, so evens out. Yeah, not anymore though.
I do tuck the end into the bed frame, and then you get a little smooth. There will be no wrinkles in that comfort.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
It's nice to walk into.
Well, and I think there's really something to that, because I mean, the punchline of my book, where this is going, is I think that what we're supposed to do is be good in particular. Because no matter, like, if you exist in physical form in time, you have limitations. Like, it would be better if I could be with all of you in person right now, but we're in different cities. Why? Because we have bodies. It's like we are somewhere. So if you're going to be somewhere, that means not being elsewhere. Right now, we're talking about this book, but we could be studying Aristotle right now. So because we have to pay attention to one thing at a time, we're not studying Aristotle. If we're going to pay attention to something, that means we're not paying attention to something else. So in order for us to exist, we have to be limited. But what that does is it gives us an opportunity to make choices within limitations. And we can make good ones or we can make bad ones. And I think what we're supposed to do is be good. And there's nowhere that you can be that you can't be good. There's no amount of limitation that can prevent you from making a good decision. And that's Viktor Frankl's point in Man's Search for Meaning. He was captured by Nazis, went into several different concentration camps. And one of the main points of his book is, I still had a choice. Even if I couldn't control my body, even if all these terrible things were happening around me, there's freedom in here. There's freedom in here. And I could make that choice well. And that sustained me. And so then when he left, he created a new kind of therapy called logotherapy, which helped people to basically find positive meaning in their circumstances by making good choices, even within severe limitations. And someone else, if I'm like, maybe this is not fair to Paris Hilton, so forgive me, I'm just using it as an example. But if I'm Paris Hilton and I've lived a really privileged life, and it is a bad example because she's actually had a pretty hard life for some reasons. But let's just say I'm a very spoiled heir to a fortune. I might look at Zach and say, that guy is severely limited. His life, man, I couldn't live that. I mean, he's living in poverty. He's living in squalor. But I don't really compare myself to that kind of life. Like I don't sit around thinking, what would my life be like? How would all my problems go away if I had $1 billion? But I could. Like there are people who sit around in situations like mine and think my problems would go away if I had $1 billion, if only I could win the lottery. And they're very dissatisfied with their limitation. But the fact is, even if you won the lottery, even if you got the $100 billion, you are still in the category of limited human. You have not escaped that category. Your limitations have just changed. And so you can still rage against that, but if you do that, you're raging against your existence here on earth. And so ultimately what we have to do is be good where we are, and we can do that anywhere. The cool thing about that is, in order to be good where you are, you have to know the good. You have to know goodness. And I think that this is the Christian idea, is that we can know goodness, like itself. Aristotle calls it the good. He says everything strives for the good, no matter where it is, no matter its particular limitations. And the satisfaction of our soul comes not from any particular circumstances, but from our knowledge of the good, our knowledge of goodness itself, and our relationship with that. So the good, that thing, that's God. It's a different name for the same thing. And you can imagine that it has a will, or you can imagine that it's impersonal. Like Aristotle does not describe the good as having a will, whereas Christians would describe it as having a will, and so that's why they call it God. But it's the same idea. So Jesus comes to earth and he says, I do nothing on my own initiative, only what the Father tells me. In other words, everything that I do, I'm just being good. Like I am regarding goodness, and then I'm embodying it here within my particular limitations. And so that's why we say that Jesus was the Son of God, because he perfectly represented goodness itself in particular. And then the disciples, right before Jesus was crucified, the disciples asked him, they said, please, if you could just show us the Father, we'd be satisfied. In other words, just show us goodness itself and we'll be happy, because that's what we want. And he says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. It's like if I put a glove on my hand and I go like this, and you guys say, Zach, if you could just show us your hand, you'd be satisfied. And I say, if you've seen this glove, you've seen my hand. Or it's like if there's a flag waving in the wind and you say, if you could just show us the wind. Well, if you've seen the flag, you've seen the wind. Why? Because the flag does nothing on its own initiative. It does only what the wind tells it to do. So that's Jesus's relationship with God. In other words, a particular limited man's relationship with goodness itself. And he was able to sustain severe limitation to the point of like excruciating pain, torture, and mockery, and execution. He was able to sustain that and be good during it because his relationship with the good sustained him. It's so strong. It's so satisfying. It's sufficient so that he could be like, he's been like brutally tortured and whipped and mocked, and he's got the crown of thorns, and he's up on the cross. He's got nails in his hands and in his feet, and he's bleeding and suffocating. And John, one of his disciples, is there with his mother. They're probably both really freaking out in that moment. And he's dying, and he says, John, please take care of my mom. Mom, this is your son. He says, this is your mother, this is your son. Please take care of each other. So he's worried about them while he's bleeding and suffocating and dying. And then he says, Father, please forgive them because they don't know what they're doing. In other words, like goodness itself, the thing that Aristotle calls the good, please forgive these people. Please reconcile these people to you. They're not being good right now. But forgive them because they just don't even know who you are. They don't know what it means to be good. They don't know that a connection with goodness itself is sufficient. We can be satisfied in our limitations. They could be satisfied in their limitations if they would only know you, but they don't know. So please forgive them. I mean, that's a powerful force. That's a powerful relationship.
But tying that back into what we were saying before about indecision, positive or negative reactions, it's like the remissions of sins is the approval. It's like the go ahead. It's the okay to say, build the house before you build the foundation. But once you become aware of what is good and what is evil, it is now on you to, have responsibility over your own salvation, over your own decision. And then you could probably also argue that if you then make a negative decision, that's what would be categorized as evil, to voluntarily know what is right and wrong and to make the bad decision.
I'm glad you say that, because I want to know what y'all think about something. I'm thinking about, I'm defining some like very basic words like reality, being, truth, and fallacy. And I think it's also probably at some point going to be necessary in this section or the next to define good. And I think I've got a definition. I have one that I like. I'm curious if you also like it. Good is what should be. Bad is what should not be. So being is something that is. So if a good thing is, it should continue. If a bad thing is, it should stop. That's what those words mean. A good thing should be, a bad thing should not be. And then evil is something that aims at the bad. Evil, like when you think of its orientation, it's striving toward bringing what is bad into being. Evil strives to bring what should not be into being.
Which is good. Right? Is that what you're saying? Because if being is good, because in my mind, when you say that, I hear that evil is directed towards good because it wants to sabotage whatever good is happening. Whether you're on the right trajectory, something bad is going to try to come in, right?
I think we're on the same page, because like, so we have a sense that what is good should be and what is bad should not be. Right. And we can agree about that. I know that there's an argument about like, culture, but torturing babies pretty much every time in every place in every language would agree torturing babies is bad. In other words, it shouldn't be. If it's happening, you should stop it. So that exists. And what I mean by that is like, what is good and bad, like there's a reality to those lines, right? Like it's not a matter of opinion that some things are good and some things are bad. That is not to say that context does not matter. Context obviously matters. But even the fact that context matters is real. So if there is this transcendent moral law, I think that's the best thing to call it. It's transcendent because it's above me as an individual. It's above you as an individual. It's above every individual. It transcends us. It's real. We are subject to it. It's moral because it determines what is good and what is bad. And it's a law because it doesn't change day to day. It's not like yesterday was a good day to torture babies, but today don't do that. It's always bad to torture babies. So it's a law. Well, that is the law of being. So being is this, it's like something and not nothingness, like the fact that there is something. And then each of us has a little bit of that, like you are. I am, as long as I'm here. So a part of, so like being allows existence. And this transcendent moral law is determined by being. Like, in other words, it's part and parcel of being. Like, I can't get out of it. As long as I exist, I am subject to the transcendent moral law. So as long as I have being, I'm subject to the transcendent moral law. So what that means then is if we talk about evil, Evil aims at the bad. Evil aims to bring something that should not be into being, which, like you said, Kyle, is a rejection of being. It's rebellion against being because it's like, I didn't choose to get born here. I didn't consent to this. I don't like this. I hate this. And I'm going to get my revenge. And then you have somebody like the Columbine shooters who go and shoot up their school and then kill themselves. And then you have somebody like the Uvalde shooter who cuts his face with knives and then goes to an elementary school and kills a bunch of kids and teachers. That's how you get there. And that's what comes after. I think I'm going to talk about that after indecision. And I think I'm glad that you guys have corrected me off of cowardice. I agree with you that that's not the right characterization. So thank you. But the next option is, okay, I've been building all of these shallow things, but I'm subject to being, and I don't like it. Being isn't the way that I want it to be. I want to be able to do certain things, but I can't do them. Or when I try to do them, there are consequences that I don't like. Like I'm subject to this law and I want out. I didn't consent to this. I don't like this and I don't think it's good. So I'm going to bring something bad into being to rebel against being. That I'm calling condemnation and protest. I'm condemning reality, which means I'm condemning the being that brought that reality into being. And I'm protesting against it, which might mean maybe I just kill myself. Or maybe I go take a bunch of other people with me.
Would you then call that cowardice? As I guess in my mind, that would be so I've had some friends that have committed suicide, and I love them as friends and as people. But I think that's a cowardice act. It's an easy scapegoat, an easy out. And I'm not saying they were cowards. That was just very cowardly to take their life and then leave everybody else to pick up the pieces and to
bear the
move forward.
burden.
Yeah,
that's a good point. I'm glad you say that. I didn't think about that because in my mind, as I'm thinking about this option, I'm thinking about like the Columbine shooters and the Uvalde shooter, more about vengeance than just escape.
Mhm.
But even with them, I think there maybe is also an element of that because here's the third option. We cannot know for sure. We have to ask, what is the whole? But we can't know because it's bigger than us. We're inside of it. We're a part of it. So I need to choose to believe that it's good, that it has some positive implication for action. In other words, that it wants to take me somewhere that I should go. Reality wants to take me somewhere I should go. If reality is good, it would take me somewhere I should go. I can't know for sure that that's right. But if I choose to believe that, then I consent to being. I consent to live here in this reality. Like I got born here. I didn't choose to be here, but now I'm going to choose to be here. Like I'm going to ratify the decision to give me birth, to give me being. I accept the limitations that I've been placed within. And I'm going to trust that even those limitations are in my favor. I'm going to trust that reality is in my favor. Therefore, I'm going to be true. Because what it means to be true is to regard a thing, to allow it to enter your mind, to understand it, to submit to that, to accept it, and then to faithfully represent it. Eventually, when I was an investment banker, I had to face the reality that I don't want to do this. I can't do this. That was a hard pill to swallow, but it was true. And so even though I didn't have the whole truth in that moment, which we can't, I finally regarded, I faced it, I looked at it, I submitted to it, I accepted it, and then I responded to it, and I left my job. That's leaving your job is a faithful representation of the belief that it's not the right place for you to be. If reality tells you you shouldn't be here and you leave, that's a faithful representation of reality. Even though you're not saying it, you're not drawing a picture of it, you're representing it in action. That's a true action. That's the opposite of getting vengeance against reality, saying, I didn't choose to be here. I don't want to be here. I withhold my consent. It's unjust for me to be here. And so I'm going to get mine. And I'm justified in doing that. My vengeance is righteous. Instead of that, I say, I don't know what this reality is. I'm going to choose to believe, I'm going to trust that it's good, even though I can't know for sure. I'm going to let reality take me where it will. I'm going to let the truth take me where it will, even though I don't know where that is. And I'm going to bet my whole entire life on this, even though I might get to the very end and realize that Uvalde shooter was right. This whole thing was a joke. This whole thing was a sick fraud. I don't know. I can't know for sure. And so I think hoping and giving your life to reality, like submitting to the constraints that you're in and going where the truth takes you, is the most courageous thing that you can possibly do. Because what you're doing is you're betting your whole life on the best case scenario. Like you're betting your whole life that being born was the best thing that could ever happen to me, even though a lot of the time this reality seems terrible. If I don't understand it, that's because of it's because of the shortcomings in my perception, not because of a shortcoming in the goodness of reality. And like a child who doesn't know, I'm going to listen to my parent who tells me to do something I don't want to do. But I can't know until I do it. It's one of the images I've got in my notes right now is it's like, imagine the four of us are in a little army unit together, and we are being chased by a gigantic platoon of enemies, and they're well armed, and like if we face them, they're going to kill us. So they're chasing us. The four of us are running, and then we encounter a minefield. And we know if we just charge ahead, we're going to get blown up and we're going to die. But if we turn around and fight this enemy army, we're going to die. So what we have to do is find a way through the minefield, but we don't know what's in it. And then we find a map. And the map shows us where the mines are. And it shows us the path to go. But we don't know if the map was planted by the enemy or if it was planted by a friend. So we have to choose. Number one, I'm going to trust this map, and I'm going to go the way it tells me to go. Number two, I'm going to assume this is an enemy map, and I'm going to go a different way. I'm going to go my own way through the minefield. Or number three, I'm just going to turn around and face the enemy and go out in a blaze of glory. I'm just going to die, but I'm going to make it huge. The most courageous thing to do, well, I mean, you could argue. The point that I'm getting at is you could choose to trust the map, and you could walk through the pathway only to discover on the last step, right as you're about to exit the minefield, the whole thing was a sick joke planted by the enemy. They just wanted to give you false hope, and they blew you up right at the end, and they're all going to laugh at you as your body parts fly everywhere. You don't know until you get out. I think that's what we're dealing with. We have to trust that it's good. It's the only chance that we have.
Yeah, I mean, I guess not to that capacity, but yeah, I mean, you have to get out and you're going to get burned, whether you're overly kind or John's building a new house and, the guy decides that he doesn't want the house anymore. Like I think it's trials and tribulations and getting out there and figure out, well, in my mind, this was good, but at the very last step, evil came in and, tried to slide in, and next thing I know, I'm blown up for for just following what you thought was good.
Hmm. Yeah. Punished for trusting.
Yeah. And but I guess to your point is you don't know, right? Like I try to find the good in every person, regardless if deep down I've got a let me throw this at you. I've got a grandfather who is almost on his dying bed right now. I am the only relative that he has contact with. He has basically cut ties with every single person. I've been working for the last 2 weeks. I got him into a rehab facility. I've been working to get him back to his independent living, getting home health services and kind of a palliative hospice care set up. He has completely undermined everything that I have done behind the scenes and continues to try to leave AMA, which would null and void everything. And these services would then refuse to come in because he left on his own accord. I want to think that he's a good person, but also I know that the evil in him, there is a reason that he cut every single person off, or vice versa, that they cut him off because he's not a good person. He really isn't. But me, I try to find the good in it. Like your family, I'm really sick and tired of dealing with it. It's like I've got my own stuff going on. I don't need this. So I don't know.
Hmm.
It's a weird spot, man.
Yeah. Well, because I mean, you're talking about seeing the good in a person, but then there's two things that are going on even outside of that. So you said it's a grandfather?
Yes.
So your grandfather is looking at the the world he's been born into. He's living in the same world as we are, but the particular limitations of his life are different. And probably from the sound of it, a lot worse.
Yeah.
And it seems from what you're saying that he's looking out at this thinking, I hate this. I don't want to be a part of this. There's nothing about this that is good. And so I don't care to be good
Yeah.
because it's a falsehood. It's a fantasy. It's a there's nothing to it. Like the reality, the truth of this reality is just brutality and suffering and injustice. And I'm the victim. I'm the punchline.
Yeah. I mean, the guy just got busted smoking on live oxygen. So, like, he's not only is he going to blow himself up, he's going to blow up the entire rehab facility.
Oh my
And
gosh.
it's comical. And you know, I hate to bring a comedic factor into it, you know, as I'm speaking of a family member, and I'll be 31 on this on Tuesday. And you know, I've known the man for 31 years of my life. And from what I remember growing up, he was always good to me. He never did wrong until I did my due diligence and understood why my mom hasn't talked to him in 20 years, why no other family member wants to be a part of his life, you know, why he is now alone. And I think that's where my heart comes in. I'm like, well, from a human aspect, I don't think anybody should have to go out alone. You know,
Mm,
that's
mm.
just the good in me that I don't want him to do it alone. Whether I want to be a part of the situation or not, I, I wouldn't want to do it.
Ah, well, okay, so how about this then?
Yeah.
So here is from the Christian perspective, it's a nice illustration of how sin distances us from God. So sin would be being not good. Like you know what's good, you do something else. That's sin. It's an archery term. It means missing the target. So being perfectly good would be hitting the bullseye. Something that's not that is sin. The Christian idea is that when we do that, we distance ourselves from God, which is kind of tautological. Tautological just means like A equals A, because the good is God. So yes, when we reject what is good, we reject God. It's the same thing. They're different words for the same thing. And yet, even down in the depths, there's something in you, Kyle, that it's like you want to believe that there's some goodness in there, or even if this man has completely purged himself of goodness, it's still not good for someone to go alone. Like, even if he had completely purged himself of goodness down to the last 1%, you would still prefer to be there and like hold his hand when he dies. Because it's not about anything that he does. He is. And because being is in him, there's something good in him, because being is good. And there's something in your soul that knows that. And you want him to know that too. And so you want to persistently take care of him despite the bullshit that he throws at you.
Oh, yeah.
Because even pressing against his bullshit is your statement that it's good here. Even when things are terrible, there's something good to be done. See, you're terrible and I'm being good. It's possible.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
you could choose to do this too. And if you did, you could have that sustaining relationship with goodness, even in your severe limitation. And it would be better. It wouldn't be perfect. It would probably still be terrible, but it would be better and it would be good enough. And it could be beautiful even, because sometimes the most severe limitations are the best opportunities to manifest goodness. Just as, you know, the image of Jesus on the cross, dying, tortured, mocked, suffocating, bleeding, says, forgive them. It's like, wow, that is goodness achieving victory over a very heavy weight.
And it's so important that's shown. I mean, to take it to a broader lens, I mean, this is between a relationship directly between you and your grandfather, but at a broader lens, you look at a country like Germany after World War I, and they were wronged, right? I mean, their economy was bankrupted, they were in famine, it was a terrible state. And through that state, they developed this anger, they developed this resentment. And it was easy for someone like Hitler to come in and to mobilize them and create a common enemy and to direct them that way. And it's Jordan Peterson has a lot of good material on and exactly how that transpires. But at the end of the day, if there was a sense of, let's see the good within this, like, let's see the good, like, okay, you may have had a hard life, but there's still good within this. And if there's someone that can, even on small, like person by person levels, you go in there and you set the example and you say, it seems intangible how this is good right now, but it is good because being is good. His being is good. Even if he doesn't turn the corner and, you know, mend the relationships, every bridge that he's ever burned down, just the process of you standing strong and saying, he is good. It is worthwhile to do what is right to help those that need help. What you're doing is like you're setting the example for yourself, for everybody around you. And I think that has a much larger effect outside of just your relationship with your grandfather's own current state. And I think that's incredibly important.
Now, let me ask you this though. No, and not just in his given circumstances, but knowing what's right and what should be done and having the resources to do so and willingly not doing that is bad and cowardice.
If it's true that it's right.
So
even if it's maybe something that you could empathize with, like something that you could understand.
He has every tool in front of him: occupational therapy, physical therapy, the medications, all the professionals around him, and he refuses to take part in it. He refuses to help himself. That would be considered bad and cowardice, right?
Add something here. For like Kyle, when you said that he knows that basically he has everything, but he's not accepting, right?
Yeah.
So I think, I'm not sure, I think that person has a really deep down regret, because I know some people who have been like, I'm talking about old people like his age. So when they have really deep down regret with never worked on the basically regrets before. So it accumulates, right? And even at that age, they're so stubborn. They just don't want to listen. So when you talk to them openly, it's very hard to talk to them, first of all. Like, you have to be extremely patient. They're not easy people to talk to. So I think that, like, yeah, he has really deep down regret. And then, like Zach mentioned earlier, he doesn't have anything to compare with because he never seen the good. So he always seen the bad. And then until he really sees it, and then he really experiences it, then he will believe it. That's what I think. Because like I'm not turning this table to me, this attention, but I, as a person who's been through really like extremely hardship in my life from a younger age, so I have earlier on, before long time ago, long story short, so I actually didn't have any good to compare with. So I had to keep doing the research, like I keep believing that there is a good somewhere. So as I keep doing my research, then I found something good, and I was obviously happy. And that's my point, is like, he hasn't seen the good. You are just one example. And because he left his family and he's alone. And then, like, again, he didn't probably see any other examples, because just one example is still not enough sometimes. It is, but sometimes it cannot be enough. So he has to see more than one example. And then again, like, he probably has really deep down regrets, and then he's not happy with his decisions, because maybe he didn't make that decision consciously. Some people like they just make unconscious, not conscious decisions.
Right.
So that's my opinion on that topic, because I've been like talking to this type of people, trying to understand. Like, I'm talking, when I say these people, I mean people who've been really extremely hardship in their life, not just like small hardship. I'm talking about really deep. So like, that's what I understood. Like, I talked with 3 people so far, and they all have really like deep down regrets. The chances either they didn't take to improve their lives, or they just alone, like they just basically isolated themselves instead of just going out and trusting basically like the universe. They isolated themselves and they have regrets. And so that's what I learned by talking with 3 people.
And I would also say, if we're talking about what it means to be good, I mean, I think an excellent example is Christ, right? I mean, there's, to a level, what you're doing is you're accepting the sins of your grandfather, and you're saying, I forgive you for the things that you've done to you and to your family, that he continues to do to you and to your family. And you're saying, I forgive them, no matter what your response is. No matter how you respond to what you're doing, you're saying, here's love, here's forgiveness, it's okay. And like, what you're doing by that is you're basically saying, the example that you gave earlier, like, how you do one thing is how you do everything. And what you're doing is you're kind of setting the precedence for yourself on how you're going to interact with people, just for the sake of this example, living in active sin. And you're saying, I still forgive you, because that's what is right, that is what is good. And no matter what you do with what I give you, it is still worthwhile for you to do that, because that is what is right. I still believe that what you're doing is the right thing, no matter how he responds to it. Any outcome that could come from this, I still think that what you're doing, and continuing to, as difficult as it might be, say, okay, I'm giving you all this stuff you're doing. And a great example of this from my lens is, my sister was a heroin addict, and she has a severe eating disorder. And when she was bad, it's like, similar situation. We're giving you everything you need, and you're choosing the wrong path. I mean, it is very, very apparent that, like, this drug will kill you. It is causing hardship to the family, to everyone around you. Like, this is selfish of you to do this. But that continuation and push of, but we still love you, we're still here for you. That was an instance where luckily there's enough time, and, God willing, she was able to recover. But if the family would have turned their back on them, they never would have had a chance. And the implication of that, and everything else in my life, within my own family dynamic and other friendships, and my future relationships and kids and things like that, I think if what is good is to be forgiving, understanding, and helpful to the best of your ability, then I think that that should apply to absolutely everything in life.
Mm. Well, and
Yeah.
it's the drama of the whole universe is playing out with you, John, and your sister, with you, Kyle, and your grandpa. Because if if I'm if I've been born into this reality and I'm severely limited and I'm suffering severely, and I look out at all of this and I say, this is bad. Like being is bad. And I'm rejecting the things that would give me life, and I'm actively doing things that harm my life. That's a rejection of being. Like it's even if he's not putting a gun to his head, that's suicidal behavior. I mean, it's self-harming, walking toward death kind of behavior.
Self-sabotage.
Self-sabotage. It's a rejection of being. Well, here's Kyle. Kyle says being is good, and he believes it. And Kyle's also had a lot of hard things in his life, and he's responded to it with goodness, which is faith. It's trusting. There's even when I experience something really hard, I'm going to hope that something in the future will justify it. I'm going to choose to believe that there may be justification in the future, even for this thing that I don't understand right now that's terrible. That's true, I think. I mean, it seems to me that you're right. Like, even when you do experience something terrible, when you respond to it with trust and faith in the goodness of reality, and you're good despite that, something does come to justify it eventually. Like when your foundation collapses and your whole life falls apart, now you learn how to build a foundation, and that's worth it, actually. Even though that was terrible, what you gain is even better. And so it justifies the suffering because you responded well, because you decided to be good even when you didn't understand and even when you're suffering. Well, so here you are showing goodness, being good to your grandfather. Well, you represent being to him. You embody being to him. Just as Jesus embodied the Father, because I do nothing on my own initiative, only what the Father tells me to do. What does that mean? It means he was good. Like, I know the good. The good lives in me. It dictates everything that I do. No matter how much I suffer, no matter how much it doesn't make sense, I listen to God and I obey God. I am good. Well, God is being. God's the source. Like that's also the same thing. Like I don't care if you call it God, I don't care if you call it the universe, I don't care if you call it, being, whatever, that thing. Well, when that thing is embodied by Kyle and encounters a man who hates being, that man makes Kyle suffer. Because how else am I going to make being suffer? Where's being? Where do I find him? Who do I sue to get justice from being? I can't find it, but here's Kyle, and it's in him. So here's my revenge, even if he's not doing it consciously. Well, that's exactly what happened to Jesus, because Jesus perfectly, I mean, it sounds like you're doing a great job, Kyle. But I think you would probably say you're not doing it perfectly, even if you're doing it really well. Jesus did it perfectly. He never deviated from goodness. He was perfect goodness itself in limited human form. And so then everybody in the situation, like your grandpa, who they're severely limited, they're suffering, and they've decided to say, I didn't decide to be here. I hate this. Where is this? How can I get justice against God who has wronged me? Well, here he is. Crucify him, torture him, mock him. Finally, I can get my revenge against this thing that made me suffer. And it's the destiny of Christ. And it's the destiny of anyone who decides to follow the good, who decides to give their life to the good, is to reach out to into the darkness, into the depths of someone who's suffering and resentful and bitter and hateful and maybe even evil, and to say, here is goodness. And there's nothing that you can stop me from doing. There's nothing that you can do to stop me from doing what is good. There's nothing you can do to stop me from doing what is right. And there's nothing that you can do to stop me from loving you, because it doesn't have to do with you, because you're here. And the being in you makes you worthy of that.
I think kind of in his situation, I'm sitting here looking at your right to hope number 4 bullet. By demanding an answer from ignorance, reality provides us with a natural right to choose our response. I think in my mind, and I've asked this, I said, hey, what? Not so much why are you the way that you are, Michael Scott, not so much that, but more so of just like, hey, like, why are you doing things you're doing? What is it that you want? Do you want me to back off? Am I being too selfish that I want you here? Or is it that you just, would you like to go home, smoke your 2.5, 3 packs of cigarettes a day on oxygen and just go on your own time? So I mean, maybe that's how I would read that, is just demanding an answer is he is being ignorant to the fact that people like myself actually want him here and are working for him in my being. And he's just blatantly saying, he's stiff arming the idea. He just doesn't want it.
Well, it's that, yeah, he always has a choice, because, I mean, have you ever known somebody who twists everything into the negative? Like,
Yes.
or they see a bad motive in everything.
Yes.
Well, it's like, I mean, I don't know if this is the case, probably not, but let's just say like your grandpa has some money and then he's like, well, he just wants the inheritance. Of course he's being nice to me, dick.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't have money, so
So whatever, but like whatever
Yeah.
reason, it's like I could twist it.
of
I can
course.
always, and why is it that I can always find something to twist? Because I don't know everything and you don't either. So there's always some dark space where I can invent something that makes this bad. But there's also always some dark space where I can hope in something good. It is because we don't know everything that we can choose to hope. And it's because we don't know everything that it's arrogant to condemn. We don't really have the right to do that, because those decisions, I mean, even to end your own life, that would be the most justifiable thing. But even that, it's like, what right do you have to end your own life? Even if like you do place a burden on other people around you. So there's that. But even if nobody knew who you were, you have the opportunity to live. You have the opportunity to be good. You could go do something for someone else. And when you end your life, you eliminate that possibility. Like, who are you to say that that's the right thing to do? Who are you to pass judgment on reality? Who are you to pass judgment on being? It gave you birth. It gave you life. You don't have enough information to make that choice.
And that's where I think it's almost irrelevant to get stuck in the weeds of how people are responding and to try to gauge, what people's reactions are to what it is that you're doing. I mean, again, to kind of zoom out and to look at it from a Christ-like lens, you look at him and he was being wronged, he was being crucified, and that did not deviate what he was doing whatsoever. The way that I view it, it's like you almost have to just sit at a high level and do what is right, do what is, spread that, and then whatever transpires afterwards within that, it happens, but you almost have to be disconnected. There has to be like this voluntary acceptance where you're saying, I'm giving you this, and whatever you do, that's fine. Because if you try to respond directly with them, it's like in market research, you never ask someone what they want because nobody knows what they want. Like it is a waste of time and money. If you said, hey, I'm in e-commerce, what do you want to buy? What are things that you like to buy? That is going to be different from their actual buying behavior. Like it's like that doesn't matter. Like you just have to send things out to the market, and then whatever works. And then then with whatever works, you run with it. So like you do what is right and what is true. And if it's working from your lens, right, like you're helping your grandfather he's pushing back. There's different things. He says, I don't want this. I want that. I don't need your help, whatever. At the end of the day, like, he's in that treatment facility. And if that's good in your mind, because life is a good thing and his existence is a good thing, then it's like, then just keep doing what you believe is good. And, respond as careful as you can in order to, maintain what is good. But you almost have to like disconnect yourself from, I'll just call it the weeds, right? Like the things that can be altered by emotion or their own personal experience, because their reality is different from yours.
Right.
So you almost can't fight that battle.
So yes, I just want to comment what John said. Like, not basically that's what worked with me and my father, because growing up, I never had a really good relationship with my father. So like I had to learn. Like it took me a long time. I like Kyle. I still like show him. Like I used to show more love and caring. Like try to make him understand that basically the world is a nice place. Being is good. But it was really hard for him to accept. Even now, he cannot accept it fully. But what I learned is I do something like good for him. I like make him feel good. I make him understand that this is a good thing. But at the same time, like I don't talk too much. I just show my action and then kind of distance myself, because when you have a deep conversation, it's not going to work, because he will start basically like not accepting it. He's like, oh, I don't need it, like self-harming and stuff. Like I'm not talking about suicide. It's just like being ignorant, not accepting the gift that you're offering. So what worked with me, yes. So I had to learn again to have this sort of a balance, not have a deep conversation at the same time, like very short. Like so you have to have. It's not. I don't know what word to use on actually. Like I cannot say boundary, because boundary is different. So that actually worked. And he's still like, just like you, Kyle, you do for your grandmother. I mean grandfather. I still like care for him. Like when he's even sick, he doesn't want to talk to anyone. He just like, I'm fine, I'm gonna suffer, but I bring him to the hospital without even asking him. I just go and like, okay, I bring him to the hospital, or I bring him to see his PCP or whatever. And I don't tell him I'm bringing you. I just say, okay, we need to go somewhere. I bring him, and then when he's there, he smiles like, oh, you brought me here. But he doesn't show anything. But I know that like if you keep doing this, and one day he will thank you. Like he will be like, oh, okay. Like because my father cried like one time, because he lives far away from me, very far. So one day he called me and he actually cried, because he didn't, even though I have sisters and my mom, like he cannot openly talk to anyone. He's not used to it. So he called and he cried. So I believe that one day he will understand your the gift that you're offering him, he's not accepting. So he will understand it. So try to have, I don't know what's going to work for you, but again, I'm just giving you my example. Maybe it will work. So try to have, not to be too close and not too distant either.
Yeah.
To have this balance.
I don't, and I try to base my life on not having, expectations. I have expectations for my wife that she will be faithful and that she will be good to our newborn child. But in regards to expectations of other people, I hope that if I ever met Zach in person, that he would be kind to me, but I don't expect him. Like I don't, because when you have expectations of people, you 99.9% of the time, you're going to get let down.
Yes.
Zach, let me ask you this. Being good within and being good to others, but still somewhat having a guard up in order to protect yourself. What are your thoughts?
I think some distance is necessary, but not to protect yourself. That's not, maybe, but that's not exactly the point. So I'll give you one like real life example, like a personal example, and then it ties into a biblical concept that is, I think, pretty universal. So when John and I were living in Austin with our friend Marino, who's also in this group, I had been dating a girl named Brittany. we had been together for about 4 years with a break in between. And so then we had been together for about 1 year. Brittany had some pretty serious problems. She was very depressed. She was very anxious. And so when John and Marino and I decided to move down to Austin together, I told her, I said, hey, like, this isn't working. We are all going down here on a mission. We're trying to go help people. We need to focus. We need to work. And like, I've done everything that I can to help you. And it's time for us to end this, because I cannot afford to have this relationship anymore. And she cried and she poured her heart out to me, and she said, please, 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 I don't want to do this. I love you. Like, I know that I have to change these things. I know that I've been doing these things wrong. And like, this is what I'm going to do. And this is what I'm going to do. And I'm like, I've been waiting for this for years, and I love her. So, okay, let's do it. Don't let me down. Actually do it. Not for me, for you, because I love you. You've just had this moment of clarity. Do it, please. And then we go down to Austin, and it's like nothing ever happened. Every day she would wake up and she would say, I hate it here. Every night we'd go to sleep and she'd say, I hate it here. I hate this. I would go and get a shower, and then I'd come back and she's rummaging through drawers. And I'm like, what are you doing? And she said, looking for scissors to cut my wrist. And at that point, I was like, I didn't want to indulge her with, I had realized that she was doing these things for my attention. And so I started to learn that my attention is actually harming her. And so she said, looking for scissors to cut my wrist. And I was like, on the carpet?
You're sick.
I guess that's what I was trying. Sorry to interrupt you. That's what I was trying to tell Kyle, that your attention can hurt, like can harm him. Like he will
Yeah.
crave for more attention. So you know that you want to do good, but don't give too much attention, because like it's gonna get worse. Like he's gonna ask
Right.
for more and more and more. So
Maybe. Well, and I'll get to the punchline. Sorry.
yeah.
But I said it casually, but my heart was pounding, because I thought, I'm trying to do this to help her, because I thought, I don't want to feed this. But then it's like, next time I go into the bathroom, am I going to find a body? I didn't know. She had been talking about killing herself for years. And so finally, there came a point when she gave me just more of her toxic smoke, and I finally like snapped, and some toxic smoke came out of me too, for the first time. And then it was at that moment I was like, I can't do this anymore. I love her. I don't want to give up on her. But that was practically involuntary. Like, something really nasty just came out of me. And I know that if I continue to participate in this, I am going to become a person that I don't want to be. So in order for me to remain good, I must be separate from you. That's how God is with us. And I mean, I'm going to say God. I don't really care what word you use. I think that that we can have a relationship with this thing. So I'm going to call it God. So God, goodness, wants to be with us the same way that I wanted my girlfriend, my ex-girlfriend. I wanted her to have a good life. I wanted to help her. I wanted her to be happy. I wanted her to be rid of the anxiety and depression. I wanted her to stop making the bad decisions she was making to harm herself, because I loved her. And yet, by her rejection of me, by her rejection of my help, and more importantly, by her rejection of the things that she knew that she should be doing, by her rejection of what she knew was good, she forced me to distance myself from her. Goodness and that kind of what's sin. And I know that that's kind of a loaded word, but what that means is just not goodness. Goodness and not goodness don't belong together. So it creates a separation. It's like oil and water.
Oil and water can be together too. It's just you have to find the right way to mix them together.
Yeah.
I don't-
Well, you know what you need? You need a emulsifier,
Yes.
right? Which is a
Yes,
compound.
Yes.
And it's a compound. I would love to look into the chemistry of this. I'd love to know how this works. But it by itself it won't. If you have, it's like egg yolks, right? Serve as an emulsifier. So you can mix oil and water together, like if you're making mayonnaise
Oh, yes.
or something like that. So in a sense, Jesus is the emulsifier. Like he's the thing that allows the oil to mix with the water. And you know, Zarina, you were talking about regret,
Mhm.
and I wonder if you would agree with this. These people are looking back at decisions that they made that were not good, and they were carrying the weight of that. Like,
Mhm.
I wish that I had done this differently because then my life would be different,
Yes.
and it was my fault.
They,
Would it be fair? What
oh, continue. Sorry.
would it be fair to say? Would it be accurate to say that these things, if we're going to say that sin is not goodness, sin is not doing what's good, these things, these regrets they were carrying were sins, and they were burdened with the guilt of that sin. They were
Mhm.
burdened with the guilt of knowing I made decisions that were not good. I isolated myself or whatever, and then here I am. And so then the message of Christ is to say, I forgive you. Yes, you did things that were not good, but you can be as close to goodness as you ever have been now. You don't have to carry this burden and perpetuate error. You can know good and you can be good here and now. And just like if I become a billionaire, I am still in the category of limited human being. Well, also, if I lose all my money and I'm homeless, I'm still in the category of limited human being. Like, not to say that that's a trivial thing, but you're still basically in the same situation relative to the good. Like, you can embody it wherever you go. You can know it wherever you go, no matter how bad things get. There's a story about a Romanian couple. It was a pastor and his wife of when the communists took over Romania, and the pastor was thrown in prison for a decade. The wife, and he was a political prisoner. He hadn't committed any crimes. It was because he was preaching, and the communists are like anti-religion. So they threw him in prison. She went and tried to get him out, and then she was thrown in prison. So she got out like 7 years later, goes home. She finds her son grown, a grown man now that she barely recognized, but they reconciled. Her husband was not there. So she started asking, trying to find him in the prison system. Is he alive? Is he alive? Is he alive? And some people would say, yes, we think we heard this guy. We think he was in solitary confinement at this one prison or whatever. But then the government started coming to her and saying, divorce this man, divorce him, and pressuring her. And she said, my marriage with him is for life. I will never divorce him. And they said, do you know who you're talking to? Divorce him. She said, no. So then they started coming to her and saying, your husband's dead. And then they started sending prisoners to her. And the prisoners would say, we're sorry, we knew your husband, he's dead. Well, after he had been in prison for 10 years, her husband came back. He had 18 scars on his body from when he was tortured. And he'd spent a lot of his time in solitary confinement because they wanted to separate him from people because he just kept talking about God and Jesus, and they wanted to stop that. So he's reconciled with his family. He sees his son for the first time after 10 years, sees his wife for the first time after 10 years. And then they would pray together at night, and he would say, God, if there's one more person in that prison that you want to know about you, kind of like your experience, Kyle, with your grandfather, if there's one person in there that you want me to bring your goodness to, send me back. And so he, outside of prison, he preached for like 3 or 4 years and avoided the communists, and then finally was captured and sentenced again. So at the sentence, the wife said, "We knew this whole thing was a fraud. No justice is going to be done here. They're going to convict him. They're going to send him to prison." She said, "We didn't listen to a word. We just looked at each other because we thought this is probably the last time we'll see each other because people die in there." And they sentenced him and they put him in handcuffs and they're taking him out. And she said, he just turned around. I'm going to try not to cry. He turned around and he just looked at her and her son and he just smiled. And then they took him off to the prison because he knew there's nothing that you can do to me to separate me from the good. There's nothing you can do to separate me from my God. And if you put me in the darkness, I will shine this light. I'm not here to be, for my body to be satisfied. I'm here to manifest goodness. And when I do that, I am satisfied.
Mhm.
So we're writing a book about that together.
Oh, what did you say? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I said, so we're writing a book about that together.
No,
Oh.
no, she wants you to repeat everything you just said.
No, no, no. No, I no. Everything Zach said, I have learned it a long time ago, actually. Like I mean, I don't want to open another basically topic to talk about, but whatever, everything you said, I've learned it a long time ago. It's like about the satisfaction, about like all these like good things. And I know about positive and negative. Overall positive, like they say, wins, which is I truly believe, because I've been experiencing this slowly, like in my life more and more. So if you're really good, nothing can change you. Like if you have this in you, like no matter where you are, or like you guys were talking about like crying, you never seen anyone crying Lamborghini. No, I have seen people crying in Lamborghini before. Why? Because they're not satisfied with themselves. Like they don't show it, but they're not. Like some people are out there, I truly believe. Like because I've seen one. Like yeah, rich people also cry, not because of money. It's like you're not happy with your own self. You're not happy with your being. So I've learned it. So you're
Yeah.
right. Like I
Well, and
didn't know
it's-
what did you what did you want me to comment on this? I just like I just like
we're far off the trail right now.
yeah, like it just like we talked about the regret you said earlier. You started from the regret, right?
Oh, right.
Yes.
Well, I guess my real question to you is, would it be fair to characterize that as the guilt of sin?
The guilt of sin. I think in some ways, yes. Oh, I also like I don't know. I personally think it depends. It's really hard for me to answer the question because I want to still like talk to some people and get more more information. Like I'm collecting more data basically.
Okay. Well, I'll hold that out as an open question, and if you ever
Yes.
feel like you get confidence on it, then let me know. And the reason I ask is because first,
I
mean, first of all, even that idea of like the guilt of sin, like
Yes.
I'm still trying to figure out what that means. You know, I've heard those words before, but I'm trying to figure out like, okay, is this what that means? And or maybe, yeah. So
I do
that
have
would be
some
helpful.
idea. I do have some idea, like you said, but at the same time, I want to still like do some research. Is it actually true? Is it just what I'm thinking, or it's something else? So I am in the process of it. I don't want to just like say something that
Yeah.
okay, this is my opinion right now. It might change tomorrow because I don't have enough information about it. And so
Well, let's
that's
hear it, and maybe we
that's
can
what
help you figure it out.
I would love to, but I kind of want to wait for now because this is it's going to be a very deep, basically topic. It's one thing that I've been working on. one of the things that I've been working on for my own book, because I'm also writing my own book. So yeah,
Well, that's fine and that's good. So we'll hold that as an open
yes,
question. And I also think, you know, there's really nothing that I'm gonna say. Oh man, it's probably late, but I would love to show y'all something. There's really nothing that I'm gonna say. There's nothing I can say that's true that will be original. If I say anything that's like very original, I'm probably wrong. Because I'm not the first person to look at this thing and start asking questions about it. But I think that the God that created this reality likes beauty to happen again and again and again. Like there's not just one flower, there's a whole field of them. And so I think if somebody said it before and it's good, then I can say it again and it will be good. Do you guys have a moment for me to look something up to share with you?
yes, I do.
Okay.
Zach, while you're looking that up, appropriate or inappropriate, I think you'd be a great candidate to take DMT.
Oh, I have.
Oh, you
Don't worry
have?
about
Okay.
it. Yeah.
We'll talk about that another time.
Yeah, it was ayahuasca actually. So I was in New York. I was living with Brittany. This was after the girl who was saying she was going to kill herself.
Yeah.
This was we had gotten back together during our last year, and I had been living with her in New York, but then I moved down to Texas because I was recording content for my Python training business, and there's construction outside. It was too loud, so I couldn't do it. So I'm on the plane coming back from New York. I sit beside a girl who's wearing some interesting earrings. I'm like, nice earrings. Well, I tell her about Siri thinks I'm talking to her. I tell her I've been like kind of seeking meaning. I had left my investment bank job, trying to do whatever. And she's like, I know some people that you need to meet. Well, she introduced me to it's basically a Christian cult called União de Vegetal. So basically, the Portuguese come to Brazil, intermingle with the Brazilian natives, and there's this strange mixture of like Brazilian tribal ayahuasca ritual and Christianity. So I meet these people, we drink ayahuasca, go on a 2.5 hour trip to that. And then we all come back and they say, and this is why we follow Jesus. And so at that point, I was still like, I don't know about Jesus, but I was like, I think God is real. And that was an important, I would never recommend it to anybody else, but it was an important step.
Yeah. I just got offered it on Thursday and I was like, I might try it.
Well, okay. So can I, in that case, can I give you my advice?
Yeah.
Okay. I can't make you listen to my advice, but this is what I advise you to do.
Oh,
Because
here
this
you
is
go.
what I've learned. DMT, ayahuasca, acid, even weed. All of those drugs do something to open your mind. That's such a cliche associated with those things because it's true. It does. You have some vision. I don't think that's appropriate when it's gained through drugs. And I'll tell you why. Aristotle teaches that perception is a function of virtue. In other words, you can see in an equal amount to how good you are. Like, meaning is implication for action, right? We talked about that at the beginning. So if I'm going to see something that is true and meaningful, like I don't care about something that's true but not meaningful, like there are 4 bushes or 3 in the dentist's garden. When I'm looking for the truth, I'm looking for the meaningful truth. Well, the meaningful truth has implication for action. So the truth that I understand now is telling me to do something. That's implication for action. If I do that, I will then learn more. My perception will grow as my virtue grows, because my virtue is my ability to do what reality is telling me is good. If I'm not doing what I already know is good, then why do I need to know more things? Like, do I want to know more things that I can then not do? It seems like the way that this reality is structured is that there's a balance. And I think that that balance is related to our free will. It's just right so that I'm always at this point where I can choose to do the right thing or I can choose to do the wrong thing. And it's only when I choose to do the right thing that my vision expands. So now I would say, I mean, my deepest desire which is so weird to hear myself say this. I mean, thinking back to of where I've been 2 years ago or 4 years ago, my deepest desire is holiness. What does that mean? It means like pure goodness. I would like for everything bad in me, I would like that to go. I would like the only thing to remain in me to be goodness. And I believe that with that will come there's a perfect satisfaction. It's like this perfect union with the good, which and that by itself, just the closeness to the good would satisfy it. Like it's totally sufficient. On top of that, by being close to the good in that way, I would then embody the good, which makes me the best person I can be for other people. It makes my life as valuable as it can possibly be, because I would be embodying the good without any deviation. I'm just good. And then it would also give me clear perception. I would be able to clearly perceive the truth of things. Why? Because when I see it, I do it. It is what I am. Like the truth is what I am. I embody the truth because the truth is implication for action and I do it. So there'd be vision with that. I think what these drugs do, and by the way, I don't think that that's something that I can achieve while I'm alive. I don't know if it's something I can achieve while I'm alive. John is more like Greek Orthodox tradition of Christianity. And Greek Orthodox Christians believe that this union with the good is actually possible while you're alive. Other traditions of Christianity say that it's not possible while you're alive. Paul in the Bible, at one point in the Bible, Paul writes that he has not achieved it yet. So to me, it's kind of an open question. Like, I don't know if it's possible. And if it is possible, I don't know if I'll ever be like 100%, but that's my target. That's what I want to aim for, is perfect goodness. Because what else are you going to aim for other than that? We were talking about theosis. Why did I even bring that up? Can you guys tell me where I was coming from just now?
You were about to show us something, and then I rudely interrupted about DMT.
No, there's
We're talking about
DMT, right?
Aristotle.
Exactly, DMT.
Yeah.
So okay. As I practice virtue, I get closer to the good, and my vision expands. That's the right way to open your mind, I think. DMT, acid, ayahuasca, weed is a shortcut to the expanded vision without the virtue. And I don't think that I think so. For whatever reason, that was a step on my path, which I think was maybe just, I think that was maybe a gift to me because my intentions were very pure going into that. But I think it's not necessary, and it can be bad. And I had experiences doing that were terrible. Where it's like I'm never going to do that again. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
I have a question, Zach.
Yeah.
So when you say right and wrong, like doing right and wrong, how do you define that? Like, because I see it's, I mean, I didn't know, because I still, first of all, English is not my language, right? So I have to Google everything, like a lot of words I still don't know. And so anyways, when I Googled like right and wrong, so it says that it's a branch of philosophy, like it refers to ethic and moral. So
Right.
when we keep talking about like doing the right thing, what are you referring to? Like mostly?
Well, I think that's a great question, and it's exactly related to what we were just talking about. Because if what Aristotle says is true, and perception's a function of virtue, I can see to the extent that I'm good. It's kind of a catch-22 because part of what I see is what is good and what is not. Meaning, if I'm not perfectly virtuous, then I don't even know what it means to be perfectly virtuous. I can't see it.
Mhm. I just
So
wanted to know what were you referring. Sorry.
Well, so I think then what we do in the interim
Mhm.
is it kind of comes back to the primary orienting question. You have to believe, is the reality we've been born into good or is it not?
Mhm.
And if you decide that it is, then it would follow that even with my insufficient understanding, what is obvious to me is good enough for me to take the next step. Even though I don't know everything, even though I know that some of the things that I think are wrong, like there are some things today that I sincerely believe that are not right, guaranteed. But if the reality I've been born into is fundamentally good, then that's enough to move me forward. So then I think my practical rule is do what's obviously right and don't do what's obviously wrong by your own standard. And I think that that's good enough to move you in the direction that will give you greater vision. I think it's sufficient. And like as I've practiced that myself, it has proved true.
Mhm. So another question, just like
Yeah.
quick question. So you were talking about drugs, right? Like I
Mhm.
personally never took any of those drugs, and I'm not going to like for a long time. But do you take any drugs like when you sit and want to be creative, or just do you in general take creativity?
No,
creativity
because
drugs?
I found a way better one.
Okay,
Practicing virtue.
okay, wonderful.
It's
Mhm.
I've seen both. That one's better. It is more effective. It's more sustainable. It costs less money.
Hmm.
It's good for a lot of
Okay,
reasons.
all right. I'm asking because of myself too, because I
Yeah.
don't take drugs. When I write, like I guess wanted to know how your creativity comes without taking any drugs or anything. When you
No,
sit and
that's
you write
it.
down. Okay.
That's it.
Good.
It's the I want to say it's the most important part of my creative process, but there's nothing apart from my creative process than that. Like it's it. That's all there is.
Okay. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah.
I guess it's time to go. It's 12 o'clock. I also have
It's
stuff.
very yeah.
It was
All
really,
right.
I mean, sorry I joined you guys late. I wish I could join earlier. It was really nice talking to all of you again, and we will see you guys next uh,
Yeah.
Saturday. So bye
Yeah.
bye.
Great to have you on. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.